searching for songs, searching for composers. But it can even go deeper than that the music supervisor can be brought in to discuss the whole vision of the piece. They didn't have an idea before they came to me. How much would that song cost? Who owns it? Whereas, I can spend 5 minutes or less with it and tell them, this is going to be really expensive. How about I find you something else? In post-production, you can take the sound from the cassette recorder and change it, obviously, but you can't change his lip sync. That song had to be licensed quite early, and we had to know the budget and the conditions and everything agreed. So that's a race against time. It's a combination of networking and showing why you want this, keeping on people's radars. That's how it works until music supervision will be the bigger thing, and there'll be courses and more structured ways in, and more companies that need, in turn, some people might try and put exclusivity in, especially for a brand. Your music can't be used on other advertising or even other sync deals. The bad practices will get shaken out, like as more people understand what a license is and what is exclusivity and what is a buyout. I think the music industry is ready. The film and advertising industry should start to catch up.
Namaste and welcome to Music Mehfil India. Our guest today is Alick Sethi, who has been a music supervisor for about 20 years now. He's based out of the UK. If you've seen Guns and Gulaabs on Netflix, then you should know that the music placed in there that was not originally composed was actually placed there by someone called as a music supervisor, which is what Alick does. Now, what is music supervision? Who is a music supervisor? How did Alick get started with this? Who all stand to gain from this in our country's context? These are all the things that we are going to find out in this episode, so stay tuned. It is a deep dive into music supervision. Thank you, Alick, for joining us today. The term music supervision is often used in a different context in India. If we could define what music supervision is and what is it that a music supervisor does.
The clue's in the name, obviously, it's supervising everything to do with music. But what that means when you start to look deeper into it is getting involved creatively. That can mean looking for not just songs, searching for composers.
So essentially, does a large part of the work involve placing pre-existing music to match the story's requirements or the director's vision, essentially? Would that be right?
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. But it can even go deeper than that, or more, let's say more fundamental than that the music supervisor can be brought in to discuss the whole vision of the piece, especially if it's a longer film, which would need multiple songs, and it's set in a specific place or time. If it's, say, I don't know, something in a forest with a gothic horror, you would want that not just what song fits here, what song fits here. You would want at the beginning of the production, you would talk about the kind of costumes, the kind of locations, the kind of cinematography, lenses, lighting, the whole technical aspects of the shoot, all these things to make the universe where the story is believable and authentic. And you can do the same with music, obviously. You can just start curating playlists that maybe those songs will never make it onto the final cut, but they just give you an idea of the style, the sound, the sound palette, the texture of the music, the instruments that you'll use. These are kind of, I wouldn't say optional things, but it depends on when we arrive as supervisors, music supervisors, how much of this has already been thought of. Maybe the directors and the writers are very confident with music and they've already know all this and they've got even a wish list of music for each scene. Then it's not absolutely my job to do that. But if it's needed, I can do that. And of course, I enjoy doing that. It's always a pleasure to get involved creatively and try and understand the core of the script, the crux of the story, the universe where the music's being set. But there's that whole aspect to it, the creative aspect. And then you can, once you know your universal music direction, then you can start placing music on scenes. You can start looking at composers and getting them involved, and will they be able to fulfill the kind of briefs that you have? And then, of course, there's rights negotiation, dealing with budgets, allocating the budget you have, especially when you have multiple songs.
Do you also interact with the BGM guys? Since in the Indian context, actually, because we have the composers who write the song, and sometimes BGM is done by another person.
In Guns and Gulaabs, we had one person we had Aman Pant, really talented guy, doing the songs and the score. So if we had a separate situation, then of course I would be in touch with both, because my job is to coordinate and supervise and organize everything to do with music. So yeah, I would need to know who they are and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And if I need to get involved creatively, then of course I would need to be in touch with them for that.
Is it fair to say that it has three aspects to it? The creative part, the coordination between the several players that are there, the director, the producers, or the production house, the composer or the artist whose songs are being placed. And then maybe there is also a legal aspect to it?
Yeah, I mean, we do get, of course, backup from legal departments from the production, but it's also my job to make sure that, say, if I'm working for a Netflix, that they understand what Netflix would like from the music license, or whoever is the ultimate platform or owner of the whole piece, the whole show. But for me, I kind of always just slot it into two areas. One is the creative, and then one is everything behind it, everything pushing it and backing it up and making sure that the creative stuff can go ahead in the way that we want it to go ahead, because it might be too expensive, or logistically it might not work, or for whatever reason, we have to juggle them both.
From an Indian creator's perspective, be it a filmmaker, a producer, a musician, what would you say to them as to why should they understand what music supervision is?
That's a good question, actually. I've never thought of it that way, to be honest, because it's just so natural and it's so understood. You have a culture here which is towards composing, and it's done very well. It's been done for years, and it's this way of looking at things. And there are composers or music directors who call themselves music supervisors, but I think that's not enough. I think you need other skills, let's say, or to improve your skills. I'm not saying a composer or a music director can't be a music supervisor. Of course they can. You're dealing with music, but you just need to have a good network in the music industry. So I don't often search just by opening Spotify and looking at songs and going down wormholes. I call people, I talk to publishers and talk to record labels and talk to even composers I know who have a bank of songs. And I think productions think at the moment they can do all this because they see it as the whole, we negotiate rights for actors, we negotiate budgets for locations, we do all this. So music is just another thing. And of course, if that was all you were doing with music, but you hire a scout for the location. You don't go and scout yourself. You know, you hire a costume designer to come up with all the pieces that the actors are going to wear. So in terms of music, to look for the music, to search for the music you need, especially when you need an existing piece of music or a famous piece of music. And there are cases where you will need that in a story over a composed piece. Then it's better you have someone who's involved in the industry, who has one foot in the film industry, one foot in the music industry, who you can hire onto your side, and they represent you and your interests, and they can go out and find things that work for you and get them at the price that works for you. And then if that doesn't work out, they can come up with other options, either from a budget point of view or from knowing the right people, because that's where it falls apart. Especially I've found in advertising, where in India, where I get asked, oh, we like this song, and they found the song, and if it doesn't work on their budget, they never so far at the moment, they don't think to come back and say, well, what do you think? Can you find us something else? It's like, okay, then we'll go straight to a composer. That was our one shot at sync licensing.
Yes.
It didn't work, but they didn't have an idea before they came to me. How much would that song cost? Who owns it? Whereas, you know, I can spend 5 minutes or less with it and tell them this is going to be really expensive, or this is going to be really difficult to clear. Yeah. How about I do a search? How about I find you something else? So you can do a sync license. So this is where music supervision comes in, because of course you can get someone on the production staff to go and check out songs. But then of course as well, how do they know if that's a suitable value, or how do they negotiate? So there is a lot we bring.
Speaking of advertising, have you perhaps faced resistance in getting people to actually license the music? Because there's a whole trend here of owning the music.
So not personally, because I normally get caught up in jobs where they want international music or famous music. And I think they realize they can't, you know, there's just no way that's going to happen. Yes. I don't really agree with this approach. I think the rights should stay with the writer and whoever made the music, whoever created it. But I've heard about it happening, and not just in India. I've heard about it in other places when it's not a work for hire. I haven't come across it in my jobs, just because of the nature of the music that I'm asked to clear the rights for.
So how did you get into music supervision?
At the time, there was no course or study way, or even the whole industry was very small. So I was studying something completely different at university. I was studying chemistry. I got from a degree to a PhD. That was in London. And the great thing about the university at that time in UK is there were so many clubs and societies, and university is a time when you leave home in the UK. You don't stay at home. You kind of go out, spread your wings, learn who you are, see the world, experience things. I was living on or off campus, but always in different places. And I was learning about the whole club scene in London. I was a huge fan of electronic music. And I mean, like really underground house, techno at the time. Things from Chicago, Detroit, which were just bursting onto the scene. Drum and bass was just making itself known from London. That was an amazing time. And I was in all these clubs, and because that was the only place you could go to listen to the music. Or you could go to these like dusty little underground record stores, which sold the music. You couldn't buy them in the big chain stores at the time. And everything was on vinyl, a few hundred copies for the whole world were pressed, and then you had to go out and be quick enough to get these records. And I got from a point where I enjoyed listening to it, dancing, being around a DJ in a club, to where I actually wanted the music. And I was a student. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was just buying these records. And then I realized I didn't have a record player. I didn't know how to listen to these records. So the thing about clubs and societies was that our university had a radio station, a campus radio station. And because we were an engineering college, actually it was very well maintained. They had excellent equipment. They had all the engineers they could ever want to maintain all the equipment and even improve it and build radio transmitters. It was kind of a pleasure project for a lot of people. So I went in there realizing that that was the only way I could listen to my music, was to get a radio show and broadcast to other people. So that's what I did. And I did it for about a year. And then another station picked me up and put me on a national show. And at the same time, I was doing a PhD in chemistry. And in the evenings, I was organizing this radio show and being now national and having a bigger audience. PR companies wanted to send me music. They wanted me to interview DJs and people touring. So suddenly I was interviewing all kinds of people. And I got to a point where I realized that this was fun, but it was a kind of, will I really want to do this in 10 years? Like, how is that going to be? And I also saw all the DJs who were about 5 to 10 years older than me and what state they were in. So I knew that when I finished, that the chemistry wasn't for me when I would graduate. And then that time arrived. And I knew that something with music was what I wanted to do. I really love feeling and working with music.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this moment where kind of one day I was realizing that everything I watch on TV and in the movies has music on it. And how did that music get there? And this was over 20 years ago. And I started to research it, look into it. I found a few companies that did music supervision, mostly for ads, because the advertising industry in London is very, very strong and global, and it's a real hub. And because the scene and that industry was so small at the time, and Singh was just starting out, I couldn't find actually a job there. So I just took it into my own hands and started to build my own network and started to visit ad agencies and show them what I could do. And somehow I branched out into different countries and it just took off from there.
So that's interesting. How did you branch into different countries?
Again, something from my past helped me out. There was a really good thing in the whole of Europe. It was a university exchange. So for 1 year or 6 months of your degree, you could go to another EU university and study there, your subject. And it was kind of quite new when I did it. But I went to France and I went to a place called Strasbourg, which is one of the capitals of Europe. Brussels and Strasbourg both have European parliaments and lots of European organizations there. And I lived there for a year. And because of all those European organizations, I met a lot of people from all over Europe, because the universities they built there were really strong because of all the, especially in business, finance, in politics, political studies, obviously, and law, because the European Court of Human Rights is there. So that I met a lot of long-lasting friends from there. And it's very simple. When I started my business, I realized that I had a lot of knowledge of independent underground music. And it was harder in London to get that into advertising, to be honest, especially the level of music I was good at. So I was competing, against the majors, because the budgets were so huge that they could afford any song they would like. So they would go to a Sony or to a Universal or Warner and get the music that way. This is when, maybe YouTube was just starting and people could start to see films in other territories. So people in advertising and film realized their production standards had to be the same as London or in New York or in LA, but they had less money to do it. So one good thing was to get cool music from unknown bands. The budgets are cheaper, but the music quality might be just as good. So I went to visit friends on the pretext of a holiday, spent a few days with them, couch surfing or whatever, and just took 3 days of my holiday, 3 working days, and just filled it with meetings. So maybe 7, 8 meetings a day with ad agencies, with potential clients, and just hit them, took them samplers. We had them on CDs at the time, and just explained what I do and just made more and more meetings. And I went all over Europe doing that, wherever I had friends. And that's how I built up my network, and I got to know advertising film directors who were asked to travel to other countries to shoot, and then they would ask me to help, and then they would leave my contact with a local agency, and again, that's how then the agency would come back to me for other jobs. So that's really how it worked, how I built up what I did. It was a mixture of strategy and accident.
Right. So, could you please speak more about your role in Guns and Gulaabs?
Yeah, sure. After Netflix India started its music department, I think it was one of the first of, let's say, the landmark or bigger productions that actually decided to go with a music supervisor, because I don't think that it's necessary for them to do that, but the music department in Netflix is there to support them and help to get the music. So they were doing a lot of hard work to sell the concept of music supervision. And Raj and DK were, I think, one of the first who, or at least at the higher end, who said, okay, let's try this and let's do this. Let's work with the supervisor. So that's how I came on board. I have to say that actually most of the songs I licensed were ones they chose, and they're very good with the whole creative aspect and writing songs into the script. Using songs diegetically. Diegetically means that the song is actually, it's not a background piece, whether it's a song or a piece of music. It's not on the background and only we as the audience can hear it. It's actually the characters are playing with the music or interacting or listening to it on a radio or something like that. So they were very clever and skilled at weaving music into their stories in that way. So it was a lot of, I would say it was heavier on the licensing, but I always made sure that in case something wouldn't work, I had a list of backups. So I was curating playlists in case something wouldn't work for them, in case I couldn't get the rights or a song wasn't available.
Did you hit any walls or face any hiccups while doing this? And if you did, how did you overcome them?
I don't know how many I can talk about because of NDAs and things, but you always hit hiccups in these projects. I mean, they're so huge. Even on an ad film, which is one song normally, you hit walls. So that's nothing to be scared about. You have to find a way around them. And it was a great experience for me because it was the first time, I'd been on a movie, on some independent movies before, but actually on a real, high budget, long form production where there was space and scope for some famous songs as well as a really good BGM composer and song composer. We always found a way to get the songs that they wanted. That was the most important thing for me, to get their first choice songs, because I felt a kind of, I never said this, but I did feel a kind of pressure because I knew what Netflix was starting. And I wanted to repay any faith in me. I also wanted to prove to myself that I could handle such a project because I'd worked on mostly ad films before or very small independent projects. So as a supervisor, I really wanted it to work. I wanted it to be a good feather in the cap for myself and for Netflix and for music supervision in India. I wanted it to be a good case study.
Well, it actually was. I think I ended up binge watching this series and I noticed an interesting thing, that there is a mix of Western and Indian songs in this. So how did that come about?
I binge watched it too, but for about a year. So it was really fun to watch it and see it all come together, edit by edit. So I'm not complaining on that. It was it was a really great experience, and also seeing how Raj and DK work, their process and their confidence. It was amazing because they're really at the top of what they do. And those are the kind of people you want to work with. You said that there is a mixture of licensed songs, Western, and some old, like 80s, 90s Bollywood. For example, there's a scene, the Rajkumar Rao character wants to give a letter. He's not so educated or good with words in English, and he wants to give a letter to the woman who he's got his eye on. And he gets this school kid, because he's, I guess, good at school, he knows him, and he gets him to write the letter. And the kid does it by finding a cassette with some Western songs and playing and rewinding and playing, repeating the line until he understands it. It's in English. So he also doesn't quite understand. It's sung by an American singer. And it was, there's one, which is the Bryan Adams song, Everything I Do. But the other one is I've Been Waiting for a Girl Like You by Foreigner. Now, if you want to use music in this way, only way I think to do it is to license it. So you can do a lot of things. You can take a lot of artistic license and this whole suspension of disbelief in films. Like you can make a fictional town. Guns and Gulaabs was set in a fictional town. But as long as it looks like a town and feels like a town from that time period, you can do that. But with this music, if you wanted your audience to believe that he's writing this letter, he's sitting there in 1989, 1990, this kid writing this letter to this girl, and he's found a piece of music. And if you get however great a composer, Aman Pan, A.R. Rahman, whoever, to write a song now, and use the best musicians, the best studios, maybe the original musicians from that time and singers if you can get them, and make it sound this retro feeling. But it's a song you make now, you compose now. It's not a remake. It's a completely new song. And you tell the audience, this is a famous song from 1989, and he's listening to it because we couldn't afford the rights for waiting for, or a Bollywood song or whatever. You can't do that. It's just too much to ask the audience. This does get used in this way in the West, but Raj and DK really did it in a big way and smashed it in Guns and Gulaabs. And you couldn't use an unknown piece of music or even an independent, cheaper piece of music from that time from a band that no one knew. It had to be a big song. It had to be something you can refer to. And the minute you listen to those first few piano notes of Everything I Do, or the introduction, or the first line of the song of the Foreigner song, you get it. And it takes you back there. And it has to be the real thing. That's what I said earlier about authentic. It has to be authentic. It has to live in that universe. It has to be from there. Even if it's a fictional town, everything else looks good. It has to sound proper. It has to sound legitimate. So what they did in finding those songs and using those songs, because they were written into the script, so we had to license them before anyone picked up a camera, because in post-production you can take the sound from the cassette recorder and change it, obviously, but you can't change his lip sync and the things that the actor is saying. So that song had to be licensed quite early, and we had to know the budget and the conditions and everything agreed. So that's a race against time, because the minute you shoot that scene, then that's it. It's concrete. It's in stone. We were fortunate enough that we could get those original songs. But the way they used it, for me, it was really groundbreaking what they were doing. It was really elevating the story. If there's something wrong with the music, people get it very easily. It seems to really rile them and just shatter the whole illusion that you're trying to create, or the whole effect or atmosphere or texture.
So what has been your favorite project so far? It can be big, small, anything.
I really enjoyed Guns and Gulaabs. I have to say that, working on it, watching it come to life. But I'd have to say at the moment, it would have to be what I'm working on now, which is this feature-length documentary about Yo-Yo Honey Singh. This I love because I'm also very involved creatively. There's a thing when I watch actors getting awards and they say, oh, this director is very generous. And I never quite understood what that meant, because it's a kind of cliche, or it's a very, I wouldn't say overused, but it's a well-used phrase. And I start to understand. So the director of our piece is Singh, and I really love working with him. And I see now this kind of generosity that he is really interested in, not just me getting the music, of course, that we have to get all these famous songs from Yo-Yo Honey Singh's Peak, and also other songs as well. But it's also about how involved he wants me creatively, like on matters of the score and composing, and how we work together, how much trust he puts in me or ask my opinion. You'd think it should be a lot like that, but I've got used to it's not always like that at all. In fact, it's not often like that. You're often just expected to just do the things they want, bring these things. And I think he really appreciates and understands what a music supervisor is putting into the project. So it's a bit of an ego answer, because it's definitely stroking my ego, but it's also activating, I think, skills I have. And just the fact that he gets a lot of things and he wants to work in a very collaborative way. I like that. And I'm not taking anything away from any other projects I've worked on. I think on other projects, they've really known what they wanted. So it was a different case. But for me, I just feel a real balance on this project, and I'm really enjoying it as it goes.
For someone in India starting off as a music supervisor, what would be a realistic place to begin?
That's a very tough question to answer because we're even in India less than where we were in London 20 years ago at the moment.
Yeah.
But I would say find the organizations, the companies that use music supervision and go and stay in touch with them. For example, nearly 2 years ago, Netflix organized a workshop. They handpicked around, I think, 10, 12 younger professionals from Indian music industry, and they got Berklee College of Music, the European part from Valencia, to design and come up with some modules and a workshop, which I can't remember, was it 2 or 3 days? But anyway, and I was part of that whole experience. So there are things like that happening, education. But even if there isn't something like that, just talk to them, whether it's a Netflix or an Amazon or maybe some of the bigger production houses or studios are starting to get into music supervision. So, you know, when I started, there was no formal way in. I just talked to companies who were doing it and tried to show them what I knew about music and where I came from. And this wouldn't work now, but I remember at the time, so I was more of a rep. So I was putting together a little catalog for me of indie artists, small bedroom labels, small boutique publishers, unsigned bands. And I was looking for different types of music to fill up different styles and genres so I could answer all types of briefs. Someone suggested to me that I should take an ad film that I find on the internet. It was just, people were just starting to put stuff on the internet. And I should put some of my music on it and take it around and show people.
So essentially, you created a sort of demo for you as a supervisor.
Yeah. It's a bit risky because maybe someone from the agency was at a different agency and worked on that film. And actually it happened once. That's why I know it's risky, and they didn't take it kindly. And they thought they'd found a great piece of music. And why am I doing that with their film? So I just started making storyboards. Like I looked on special features on DVDs where they showed what storyboards were and how they looked like. And I made storyboards for very kind of cliched films, like a chase or a, I don't know, British gangster movie or something that was very cliched or done a lot at the time. And I obviously there was a song I had or a piece of music that would work on that.
Yeah.
So I would just send it with that to people, because filmmakers are visual people. When they see the music, you know, on the scene,
it contextualizes.
Yeah, they get the context of what it could do for their work or what it could do for their day job and how, or a project they're working on. So I wouldn't say to do that, but find a way that you can show either your music. Everyone comes to me and says, yeah, I've got great music. I can do everything, or my music is cinematic, whatever that means. And you hear this from so many people. So I was just trying to make myself, well, I'm prepared to go this extra mile to show you what music can do, what the music I bring can do, what the music I choose for you. Maybe a lot of people were kind of quizzical or found it funny or strange, but actually a few people connected with it. And I did get, you know, projects and contacts and enlarge my network from that. So now, you know, with social media, you have so many opportunities to spread yourself and talk about what you do. And there are now music supervisors in India doing that, blogging, filling a space to show that they are passionate and they're the experts. So it's a combination of networking and showing why you want this, you know, and keeping on people's radars. That's how it works until music supervision will be the bigger thing, and there'll be courses and more structured ways in, and more companies that need interns or junior colleagues to start working.
It's an ecosystem that's still evolving. Rather, it's just
exactly
out. Okay.
Yeah.
And what would you say to artists who are getting a sync deal? What are the things to watch out for? What are realistic expectations to have? Just like broad strokes.
You touched on it earlier, Aruna, the whole buyout versus licensing.
Yeah.
If it's your music that you created yourself and someone wants to put it as a sync license, avoid a buyout at all costs, I would say, unless you have a very, very clear strategy.
Yeah.
Then, of course, exclusivity, non-exclusivity. Some people might try and put exclusivity in, especially for a brand. That means your music can't be used on other advertising or even other sync deals. If, say, I don't know, you use it on a spot in India and it's really well liked for an ad film, and then someone in UK or LA wants to represent you as a sync rep, and you say, well, or they find out when they have a deal, because maybe you didn't understand the contract, that, well, we can't use that song in anything else. We signed worldwide exclusivity. Only that brand in India can use that song, even if it's for the 1 year, that was it. So then it immediately cuts off opportunities for you. And
so when in doubt, consult a lawyer? For
sure. You have really good media lawyers, but it's also common sense. Maybe you want to consult a lawyer if a production house says, oh yeah, exclusivity is normal, everyone's doing it, and you may want to ask them and they'll say, no. Or it can be, but you need a lot more money for it, something like that. I know there's a big temptation to take any job at the beginning, to just get on that ladder, however, but it's really hard to set boundaries later. So it's better to do it from the start, and you may lose a few things, but you'll also find out who's serious and who are the kind of people that you want to work with. And I have problems with this. I know that you're asking me to come and talk and talk for other people, but I have to get up every day and motivate myself and feel good about myself, and each day represent who I am and keep boundaries and learn to say no to things. And I get tempted by things like everyone else. So it's not easy, I get that, but it's better in the long run.
I think there's definitely an overarching common sense rule in all freelance work. And it has happened in other contexts where people get the semi-pro people or the beginners to brands also do this, to do work for free. And then as soon as they have budgets, they go for the established guys who turned them away the first time. So that's unfortunate, and that does happen. This has actually happened in India, where a band whose frontman is also, does work as a jingle composer. His band's song was asked by a brand that he pitched for, that can we just license that song? But the license was with a label. And so they tried negotiating, but the label was asking too much and the brand didn't have budget for it. So essentially the brand asked this person, this frontman who was also a producer, to create something similar, and he did. So that also happened. And essentially,
I bet his label were really happy with that.
I hope they never found out, because there's so much happening in this country. Sometimes you just don't find out what's going on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Drawing from the last point, since we are in India, we are in the nascent stages. What are some of the things we as potential or existing music supervisors, as artists, as creators of visual media, need to be careful of to set the right tone in order to be fair to everyone involved?
I've never been asked that before.
Okay.
I don't think it's my job to set a precedent for a whole country of
right.
Whether it was a country of a few million or 1.5 billion. I don't think I can. It'd be lovely for my ego, but I don't think I can set that kind of precedent. I would say it's just general things. In any industry, in any walk of life, how you treat people is important, I think. Hopefully, the only thing I'm guilty of is sometimes not replying to cold emails that I want to reply to from artists and stuff. But I'm very careful to fulfill my promises or to take responsibility and explain why I didn't. I've noticed in my life that there are a lot of people who are not like that, whether and often very big high up people. But that's a general thing. If you were manufacturing cars or singer or a music supervisor or a scientist or whatever, you would expect the same treatment and behavior, or you would want it. So I think that's all it is. I mean, how music supervision evolves and the creative aspects, that's an adventure for the Indian market. That's going to be sorted out by time and evolution. And as more projects take on music supervisors, there's going to be a natural way of doing things. And every country, I've worked in many, many countries, and I can honestly say each one is a little different, whether it's how they communicate, whether it's a cultural thing, whether it's what they expect from a supervisor. It's always a little different. And I have fun learning those things. So I wouldn't want to impose something. I would just... The bad practices will get shaken out, like as more people understand what a license is and what is exclusivity and what is a buyout and all these things, then few people, unfortunately, will need to be burnt by more unscrupulous or ignorant characters. But it will a level will be found. We'll see how it goes, and we'll see how involved and in-depth music supervision gets into. It's definitely needed, because compared to when film music ruled, now there's a very thriving and vibrant and bubbling and creative independent scene. And that's music that's not created with a film budget or for a film. That's music that is, like in the rest of the world, created by artists who want to tour with it and want to express their music within themselves. And I think at the moment, the film industry is lagging behind in India, the music industry, to be involved in that. I saw in the UK it was the opposite. For example, the film industry was very clued up 20, 30 years ago what was going on in the music industry, and they were following a lot and knowing like many artists and going to gigs and checking out new bands, film directors, and it was the music industry that couldn't keep up and didn't know how to sell its own license its own rights and what to do, because the director wasn't the one doing the deal. He would get a supervisor or a producer to do that back then. And now in especially the advertising industry in India, I'd say they're lagging behind. They have this one shot. Okay, we found this song. It's always a very famous song that I'm confronted with. Oh, really? It's 1.5 crore? Oh, okay. Then we'll just compose something like it. It hasn't evolved to this level where, well, if we're a youth brand and we find a band that all the kids love at the moment, or one that they will discover through our brand, that's very strong. That's really great marketing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that couldn't work in India, but it works everywhere else. So how to get music supervision on a good footing, it's more a question for parts of the film industry than actually for the music. I think the music industry is ready. I'm encountering a lot of these podcasts and seeing like myself and other people invited on music conferences, but it's pretty quiet from the film side. I would say the film and advertising industry should start to catch up with the music industry in this case.
That's interesting. That hadn't occurred to me at all. That it wasn't just lack of awareness on music supervision front, but just general awareness of what's happening in music in India. Thank you, Alex, so much for sharing such in-depth insights and your wonderful experience with us. This is going to be really valuable, not just today, but also in the years to come.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I really hope that there are some things that will resonate with your audience. But thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.